For all things health and fitness, this is the Army Gymnastics Podcast.
The Army Gymnastics Podcast.
Discover a fitter, healthier you at armygymnastics.com.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring something, deeply intuitive, something that crosses every culture and spans all of human history, the simple, profound act of singing to babies.
It really is. It's one of those things parents just do, isn't it?
Yeah.
You hum a tune, maybe you remember something your own parents sang,
Yeah.
and you offer it to your infant. But as we're about to see, this isn't just a sweet gesture. It's backed by some pretty incredible science.
Absolutely. We've gathered a fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive. We're looking at a specific randomized controlled trial, a really rigorous study that zoomed in on the physiological effects of maternal singing on preterm infants in the NICU.
Okay.
We also have a really comprehensive, systematic review that pulled together findings from, I think, over 20 studies. Gives us a broad picture of how live parental singing impacts infants, the parents themselves, and, the relationship between them, the parent-infant bias.
Right.
And finally, an insightful article from the University of Maryland that touches on the broader developmental power of music in early childhood.
So these sources collectively give us a really layered perspective. We'll go from the microscopic view, like how singing might literally shape a baby's nervous system, all the way up to the emotional bond and, the long-term developmental ripples.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to cut through the information overload, dive into these sources, and extract the most important nuggets of knowledge. We want to understand why singing to infants is such a universally cherished practice.
Yeah.
And uncover the profound effects it has using the research as our map. Get ready to see your favorite lullaby in a whole new light.
Right. Let's start by grounding ourselves in the science, because that first source, the randomized controlled trial, focusing on preterm infants and their autonomic nervous system maturation.
Yeah.
It offers some truly groundbreaking insights.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. This study specifically investigated the autonomic nervous system, the ANS. You can think of your ANS as the sort of automatic pilot for your body.
Mm-hmm.
It manages all the unconscious stuff like your heart rate, your breathing, or digestion. In newborns, especially those born prematurely, the ANS is still developing.
Right, it's not mature yet.
And its maturation is absolutely critical, particularly how it links up with controlling the cardiovascular system, the heart rate, and all that.
Exactly. And they use a really important non-invasive tool to assess this. Heart rate variability, or HRV.
HRV, okay.
So instead of just measuring the average heart rate, HRV looks at the subtle fluctuations in the time between each heartbeat.
The tiny variations.
Yeah, and these variations aren't random. They reflect the balance and activity of the two main branches of the ANS. You've got the sympathetic system, that's your fight or flight.
Right, stress response?
And the parasympathetic system, often linked to relaxation, calming, rest, and digest functions. Higher HRV, especially in certain frequency ranges, indicates more robust parasympathetic activity and better ANS regulation overall.
And this is crucial for preterm infants because, while they are born before their ANS is fully mature, specifically the parasympathetic system. Yeah, the calming one.
Exactly. That's key for regulation. And it's expected to really mature around 37 weeks gestational age, full term in utero.
So preemies often show atypical HRV features. They tend to have lower overall HRV.
Lower. Okay.
Particularly in what's called the high frequency, or HF component. This lower HF activity is a key indicator of that incomplete parasympathetic maturation. And the source notes that while heart rate is monitored clinically, HRV isn't yet a routine assessment for these at-risk babies. But this research really reinforces its potential as a marker, a functional maturational age.
Right. So this study stepped into a really important research gap, didn't it?
It really did. It was one of the first to investigate if early vocal parental intervention, meaning parents just using their voice,
Just talking or singing.
yeah, could actually influence this critical ANS maturation process in preterm infants. Could something as seemingly simple as singing help wire up a premature baby's nervous system better?
So what did they actually do in this study? How did they test it? They worked with preterm newborns who were hospitalized in the NICU. They randomly assigned them to different groups.
Okay, standard RCT approach.
Right. The intervention group had their mothers participate in sessions. They spent 20 minutes with their baby specifically, 10 minutes speaking, and 10 minutes singing.
Okay, mixing it up.
And they switched the order each day, just to control for which came first. This was done 3 times a week for 2 weeks.
And the mothers?
They were encouraged to choose what to speak or sing, using their native language, which is important. A key part was that they observed their infants' reactions throughout the session. But, and this is crucial, they didn't touch them.
Ah, isolating the effect of the voice.
Exactly. They even used a sound level meter to make sure the mother's voice was clearly audible over the usual background noise of the NICU, which, can be surprisingly loud sometimes.
Okay. And the control group?
The control group mothers also spent 20 minutes observing their infants during the same time slots, and they recorded their observations, but they specifically refrained from speaking or singing.
So that provided a baseline to see if just being present or observing had the same effect.
Precisely. And to measure the ANS activity, they used photoplethysmography, PPG.
PPG, how does that work?
It's a non-invasive technique. It uses a light sensor, in this case, placed on the infant's foot, to measure changes in blood volume.
Oh, okay.
Which correlate directly with the pulse. From the pulse-to-pulse intervals captured by the PPG signal, they could analyze the heart rate variability.
So back to the HRV.
Yep. They looked at 5-minute windows of data from before the session, the baseline during the 20-minute intervention or observation, and then for 20 minutes afterward. They focus on the frequency domain analysis of HRV, which breaks down the variability into different components like low-frequency, LF, and high-frequency HF bands, using frequency ranges adapted specifically for newborns.
Right, because their systems are different.
Exactly.
Okay, so the results. What did they find? This is the exciting part.
It really is.
Yeah.
Now, for the results, and this is where it gets really compelling, when they compared the intervention group, the singing-speaking group, to the control group,
Yeah.
the infants whose mothers spoke and sang to them showed a significant increase in the percentage value of HRV power in the high-frequency range.
The HF range? And that means...
An HF power increase is a direct indicator of increased parasympathetic activity, the calm-down system.
Wow, okay.
The p-value was 0.044, which statistically means there was less than a 4.4% chance of seeing this difference if the intervention had no real effect. A statistically significant finding.
That's pretty clear then. But you said they looked within the intervention group too, comparing speaking and singing.
Yes, and this is the even more specific nugget. They compared the effects of the speaking condition versus the singing condition, and it was the maternal singing specifically
Just the singing.
that significantly increased the high-frequency power and decreased the low-frequency, high-frequency power ratio, the LFHF ratio.
Okay, and the ratio tells us.
The LFHF ratio is another way researchers look at the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. A lower ratio suggests a shift towards parasympathetic dominance, the rest and digest side.
So singing really pushed towards calm and regulation.
It seems so. The p-value for that was 0.037, even stronger. And crucially, the HF power values during the singing condition were higher than both the initial baseline and the final baseline periods after the singing stopped.
Suggesting a sustained effect, not just in the moment.
Exactly. It wasn't just a blip while mom was singing.
So this data strongly suggests that maternal singing, in particular, stimulated increased vagal activity. That's activity of the vagus nerve, right? A major part of the parasympathetic system.
That's right. And in the context of preterm infants, this increased vagal activity is interpreted as potentially enhancing their ANS maturation.
Helping it develop.
Exactly. Remember, they are born with this system incomplete, and singing seems to provide a stimulus that promotes its development towards what you'd see in a full-term baby.
That's incredible. Really significant. The study's impact statement was very clear then.
Very clear. Maternal singing positively affects the autonomic nervous system maturation of preterm hospitalized newborns in the NICU. And as they noted, this was one of the first studies to really demonstrate this effect of vocal parental intervention through the specific mechanism of ANS maturation.
Amazing.
Yeah. Their conclusion reinforces this. The preterm infant's vagal activity significantly increased in the singing intervention group, potentially enhancing their ANS maturation. This supports the idea that infant-directed singing isn't just immediately calming.
Right.
It appears to modulate newborn HRV both immediately during the singing and potentially has a cumulative effect over time, helping to sustain ANS development that was compromised by being born early.
And they linked that to potential social-emotional benefits, too.
They did. Excitingly, they proposed that achieving earlier ANS maturation and parasympathetic activation could potentially allow for the earlier establishment of those crucial caring interactions and emotional connections.
Which are so vital for a baby's development.
Especially for preemies who face unique challenges in bonding sometimes.
Okay, so that's the biological bedrock, the potential impact on the nervous system itself. which is huge. But singing clearly has a massive impact on how babies feel and act too, right? The systematic review really dug into that emotional and behavioral side.
Yes, absolutely. The systematic review, which analyzed 21 studies, identified emotional regulation as a major theme regarding the impact on infants. It found that infant-directed singing, IDSG, as they often abbreviate it,
IDSG, got it.
clearly affects infants' arousal levels. Are they alert, active, attentive, or are they relaxed, calm, quiet?
And it depends on the song, presumably.
Well, yeah, it depends on the song's function. A lullaby aims to calm, while maybe a playful nursery rhyme aims to stimulate and engage.
Makes sense. And how did the studies measure this? It's not like a baby can fill out a questionnaire on a scale of 1 to 10, how calm do you feel?
No, not quite. They used observable indicators,
Mm.
things like the baby's body movement, their vocalizations, where they were looking, their attention span, their facial expressions and overall demeanor, their affect. And sometimes even physiological responses like skin conductivity or heart rate, similar to what we saw in the preterm study, or maybe oxygen saturation levels.
Right, things you can actually measure or see. And what did they find regarding affect and arousal generally?
Across the 15 studies in the review that looked at infant affect, there were pretty consistent findings, particularly for typically developing infants. Studies commonly reported reduced motor activity, increased stillness, and quietness when babies were sung to.
So calming effects.
Definitely. For example, the Arias and Pena study found increases in sustained attention, stillness, and quiet in infants aged 6 to 8 months during singing.
That sounds like a recipe for calm.
It does. They also noted fewer infant vocalizations during singing compared to when parents were just using infant-directed speech. That came up in studies like Arias and Pena and Carvalho et al.
Interesting. So less babbling during singing?
Apparently so.
Yeah.
And a lovely finding from Sorelli and Trehub was that singing led to more smiling in infants.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So the overall conclusion across many of these articles was a pretty consistently positive influence on infants' affect. Singing tends to make babies feel and appear happier and calmer.
What about the big one for many parents' distress? Does singing actually help reduce crying or fussiness? That's often why parents start singing, right?
Oh, absolutely. Several studies in the review specifically investigated distress, 5 of them. Qualitative studies, based more on observation and parent reports.
Yeah.
They reported that parents who sang to their infants regularly saw reduced crying, colic, and general distress. Persico et al. And Robertson and Detmer both noted less crying in their study groups.
Okay, so parents notice a difference. What about the more quantitative studies with
Yeah.
measurements?
Right. Sorelli, Jervitz, and Trehub found that skin conductance decreased significantly during soothing singing sessions.
Skin conductance, that measure.
It's a measure of how much the skin sweats, basically, which is directly linked to the sympathetic nervous system and arousal, including stress. So a decrease indicates reduced physiological stress.
Got it. Calmer body.
Yep. And Shenfield et al. Looked at salivary cortisol levels, the stress hormone.
Right.
They found that IDSG regulated these levels. And it was interesting. It showed a kind of moderating effect, modest increases in infants who had very low baseline cortisol.
So maybe perking them up a bit if they were under-aroused.
Possibly. And modest decreases in infants with very high baseline cortisol.
Calming them down if they were stressed.
Exactly. It suggests the singing might help tailor support to the infant's individual stress level, almost intuitively.
That's fascinating. Like the music itself, or maybe the parent delivering it, adapts to what the baby needs physiologically.
It seems that way. And Sorelli and Trehub made a key point that familiar songs were more effective at reducing infant distress than simply talking.
Familiarity matters.
It seems so. They proposed this is likely due to the inherent repetitive and temporal characteristics of singing the predictable rhythm, the soothing melody, the repetition of phrases.
Things babies can latch onto.
Exactly. It's incredibly comforting and regulating for a baby's developing system.
Okay, this raises an important question. Does singing help with sleep? That's another major driver for parents singing lullabies, trying to get the little one to nod off.
Yeah, the review touches on this, though the findings maybe aren't as extensive as for affect or distress. One study by Filippa et al. Found that IDSG maintained preterm infants in an active sleep state during the intervention.
Active sleep, so not deep sleep.
Right, active sleep, REM sleep, which, while maybe not the deep sleep parents are always hoping for right then, is actually really important for brain development in infants.
Okay, but what about night sleep, helping them stay asleep longer?
More directly related to that, the Persico et al. Intervention study. This was where mothers sang during pregnancy and after birth found that these mothers reported significantly fewer night-waking episodes for their infants at 2 months of age compared to a control group.
Fewer night wakings, that's huge for parents.
Absolutely. They also reported less maternal stress related to those awakenings at 1 month.
So it might not be a magic bullet for instantly knocking them out, but it seems regular singing could contribute to better quality sleep patterns over time.
That seems to be the implication. And it certainly makes those inevitable night wakings less stressful for the parent, which is also a big win.
Definitely.
Right. And finally, the review looked at attention. 7 studies specifically examined how IDSG impacts infant attention.
And what did they find there? Does singing grab their attention?
Consistently, yes. They found that IDSG captures infant attention. Studies like Arias and Pena and Sorelli and Trehub showed babies orienting towards the singing and maintaining focus.
Makes sense.
What's particularly interesting, though, is that playful IDSG, like nursery rhymes with actions.
Wheels on the bus kind of thing?
Exactly. That resulted in significantly more infant attention than more soothing lullaby-style songs in the Sorelli, Juravitz, and Trehub study.
That totally tracks with what you'd expect, right? A bouncy, engaging song is going to grab attention more than a gentle lullaby meant for calming down.
Precisely. This suggests that singing captures attention by altering the baby's arousal level to that kind of sweet spot needed to maintain focus.
And parents can intuitively use different types of songs.
Exactly, depending on whether they want to calm their baby down or engage them and encourage interaction and attention.
Now, circling back to our first source, the preterm study, while it showed those really positive ANS effects specifically from singing,
Yeah, the physiological benefits.
the systematic review added a layer of nuance, didn't it? Pointing out that the impacts on emotional regulation, the affect, arousal, distress findings we just discussed were actually inconsistent for medically unstable or preterm infants when looking across multiple studies.
Yes, that's a really crucial point. It's important to approach the findings for this particularly vulnerable population with, well, caution, as the review emphasized. While the PubMed study we detailed found clear positive ANS effects from singing,
Right.
when the systematic review looked at the broader behavioral and emotional outcomes for preterms across various studies, the results were mixed.
Mixed in what way? What did they find?
Well, while some studies in the review concluded positive impacts, like improved autonomic stability in Arnon et al., or findings like increased heart rate and oxygen saturation in Philippa et al., which they interpreted as positive signs of stimulation and engagement.
Okay.
Other studies had different or even negative results. For example, Blumenfeld and Eisenfeld found no significant impact of IDSG on feeding duration or intake in preterms.
No effect on feeding.
And quite notably, the Epstein et al. Study found negative impacts, increased physiological and behavioral instability in preterms who had severe brain injury.
Even when the singing was done carefully.
Yes, even when the singing was provided with support from a music therapist who was specifically aiming for attunement with the baby's state.
Wow. So for certain very fragile preemies, singing might not always be helpful and could even be overwhelming or stressful.
That's what the Epstein et al. Studies suggests, at least for preterms with severe brain injury. And this raises an important question. Why the inconsistency across studies?
Right. What causes the different results?
The review discussed several potential reasons. It could be related to differences in study design, like specific inclusion criteria. Some studies might have excluded infants who were very sensitive to noise or voice.
Which could bias the results.
Exactly. It could bias the results towards showing a positive effect by removing the babies who might have reacted negatively. The type of preterm infant is also crucial. A baby with severe brain injury might process sensory input very differently than a relatively healthy preterm baby.
That makes sense.
And the specific details of the intervention matter, like whether a music therapist was present to help the parent attune their singing to the baby's moment-to-moment state, as was the case in the Epstein study that found negative impacts.
So it's definitely not a simple one-size-fits-all answer for medically fragile babies.
Exactly. It's more complex. But, and this is important, despite this inconsistency in the emotional regulation outcomes observed in the review, the systematic review still suggests that IDSG is a potentially valuable intervention in the care of preterm or otherwise medically fragile infants.
Why is that, given the mixed results?
Because it offers a non-intrusive way to establish and maintain that early parent-infant bond and attachment.
The connection.
Yes, particularly with infants who are often in incubators connected to monitors and might not be able to be held, touched, or rocked as frequently as full-term babies. It's a way for parents to connect and be present through their voice when physical contact is limited or maybe even contraindicated.
Okay, so it's a tool for bonding, even if the immediate regulatory effects are complex in some cases.
That seems to be the takeaway. It's valuable for the relationship.
Moving beyond the immediate emotional and physiological effects, and even the nuances for vulnerable populations, the University of Maryland's source broadens our perspective. It looks at longer-term benefits like cognitive and motor development.
Right. This article reminds us that music is just an inherent part of early childhood life across cultures. And it's not just about calming or bonding, it's actively promoting development across multiple crucial domains, often simultaneously.
Let's talk cognitive development first. The source highlights the role of patterns and sequences in music.
Absolutely. The melody, the rhythm, the repeated lyrical phrases, these elements are structured and predictable. Learning to anticipate these patterns in songs.
Like knowing what line comes next.
Exactly. That's incredibly beneficial for building early skills needed for things like math and reading, which also rely heavily on recognizing and predicting patterns.
Interesting connection and language.
It also naturally introduces babies to the sounds and meanings of new words within a familiar, enjoyable context. And the article cites a study finding that early music exposure actually sharpens infants' brain responses, not just to music, but also to speech.
Really? It helps with processing speech, too.
Yeah. This happens in key areas like the auditory cortex and the prefrontal cortex. That latter area is involved in higher-level cognitive skills like attention control and pattern detection.
So listening to music is literally helping their brains get better at processing structured sound.
Which is essential for language and other learning. It's like tuning the brain.
That is truly remarkable, tuning the brain for language and patterns through song.
And the rhythm and repetition in songs are powerful memory builders. Just think about how easily most adults can recall childhood songs, word for word, decades later.
Oh, right? Definitely. Still got nursery rhymes stuck in my head.
Exactly. The structured nature of music helps to solidify memory skills in young brains.
Okay, what about getting the wiggles out? Does music help with physical development? Motor skills?
Absolutely. Music naturally encourages physical activity, supporting both fine and gross motor skills.
Fine motor, like small movements.
Yeah. Simple actions like playing with toy musical instruments or doing finger play songs, think Open Shut Them or Itsy Bitsy Spider.
With the hand motions.
Right. Those help babies and toddlers develop the small muscles and coordination in their hands.
And dancing or moving to the music, that's gross motor skill.
That's right, the larger movements. That builds the large muscle groups. Bouncing to a fast beat, swaying gently to a lullaby, or doing actions for songs like The Wheels on the Bus or The Hokey Pokey.
Getting the whole body involved.
Yeah. These activities build muscles in the arms, legs, and trunk. Moving their bodies in time with music helps them gain crucial body awareness, improve their balance, and enhance overall coordination. These are fundamental motor milestones, and music just makes practicing them fun.
And the UMD source adds another beautiful, maybe less obvious layer of benefit, cultural transmission.
This is really poignant, I think. Music, particularly traditional lullabies and folk songs, is such a unique and powerful way for children to connect to their family's roots, their community, their heritage.
Passing things down.
Exactly.
Hey.
These songs transmit culture, values, stories, and a sense of belonging across generations. Sharing these beloved songs creates a continuity that can make children feel safer and more secure in their world, grounded in their identity.
So we've done a pretty deep dive into the baby's experience, the potential biological benefits, the emotional regulation, the cognitive boosts, the motor skills, even the cultural connection. But as the systematic review strongly emphasized, singing to an infant is a dyadic interaction. It's a relationship.
It's not a one-way street.
No. The impact isn't just on the baby. It's profoundly significant for the parent, too.
Yes, let's shift our focus now to the person doing the singing, drawing heavily from the systematic review again. 8 of the studies specifically reported on the impact on the parent.
Okay.
And a major consistent theme identified was how engaging in infant-directed singing validates the parent's role, particularly the mother's role, as most studies focused on mothers, but likely applies more broadly.
How does that validation manifest? What makes them feel validated?
It shows up in several key ways, according to the studies. Singing increases their confidence in their ability to understand and respond effectively to their infant's cues.
Reading the baby better.
Right. Studies like Baker and McInlay and Creighton that highlighted this. When a parent sings and sees their baby calm down or become attentive or maybe offer a smile in response.
They see it working.
Exactly. It provides tangible, immediate evidence that they are being an effective caregiver. They feel capable of meeting their child's needs, and that success makes them feel satisfied and reinforces their sense of being a good mother or parent. It turns an intuitive, sometimes uncertain, act into a moment of competence and affirmation.
It's like the baby's positive response is giving the parent positive feedback and encouragement. That makes so much sense.
Precisely. It also seems to facilitate parents' perception of their infant's learning and development. As Pixley's study noted, parents often perceive IDSG as a teaching tool.
Like they're actively helping their child learn.
Yes, a way to pass on culture, language, and other skills, further solidifying their sense of being an active participant in their child's growth.
And critically, there's a significant impact on the parent's own well-being. This seems huge.
It really is. This was a strong finding across several studies. Engaging in singing was associated with enhanced maternal well-being. For instance, the Fancourt and Perkins study found that parents who sang to their infants daily
Singing.
reported significantly lower levels of postnatal depression symptoms, higher self-esteem, and enhanced feelings of maternal bonding compared to parents who sang less frequently.
Wow. Lower P&D symptoms, better bonding. That's incredibly important, especially considering the challenges many new parents face with mental health.
It absolutely is. Singing also seems to directly reduce parent stress and anxiety levels. Studies by Arnon et al., Cirelli, Jurovitz, and Trehub, and Persico et al. All noted reductions in parental stress.
So it calms the parent, too.
Yes. Persico et al.
Yeah.
Specifically measured perceived maternal stress and found it was lower in the singing intervention group.
And the ability to express emotions through singing, that was mentioned by Pixley, adds another layer. It's not just the baby's emotions being regulated, but the parent finds an outlet too, maybe.
Exactly. And that feeling of being effective at calming the baby, of succeeding in regulating their child's emotions through song, provides its own calming effect on the mother or parent.
The success itself is calming.
Right. It creates this beautiful, self-reinforcing cycle where the positive impact on the baby feeds back to support the parent's mental and emotional state, encouraging them to continue the practice.
Okay, building on that, the systematic review dedicated significant attention to the impact on the parent-infant diet, the relationship itself. You said 13 of the studies reviewed discuss this connection.
That's right. And the core theme emerging from these studies is that IDSG promotes attunement, mutuality, and reciprocity within that crucial early relationship.
Okay, let's break that down a bit. What does affect attunement look like in the context of singing, getting on the same emotional wavelength?
Pretty much, yeah. It's about the mirroring of emotions and states. Several studies like Arnonell, Baker and McInlay, and Cirelli, Jurovitz, and Trehub reported that the infant's emotional state corresponded to or mirrored the parent's effect during singing.
So if the parent is calm, the baby gets calm.
Often, yes. But this mirroring wasn't always just positive. It could be both. For example, both could enter a quiet, calm, positive state together. But remember the Epstein et al. Study with the preterms with severe brain injury.
Yeah, where it had negative effects.
They observed negative mirroring increased distress for both the babies and their mothers during singing in that specific vulnerable group.
So the connection works both ways.
It seems so. But the Cirelli study, with the skin conductance data showing physiological regulation in both partners during soothing singing, offers a physiological example of this mutual attunement and regulatory effect.
Like if their nervous systems are connecting.
And regulating together through the shared experience of the music.
That shared physiological state must be incredibly powerful for bonding.
It seems likely. It also involves responsiveness. The studies noted that caregivers respond to their infants' moment-to-moment reactions and needs by altering their singing.
Adjusting on the fly.
Exactly. This could be changing the temporal structure, speeding up or slowing down, as noted by Carvalho et al. And Longi, or simply responding to the infant's specific cues, like if they start fussing or calming down, as seen in Baker and McInlay, Creighton et al., Pixley, and Robertson and Detmer. This dynamic responsiveness allows parents to be more emotionally attuned and sensitive to their baby's state.
And this creates those special shared moments you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. IDSG strongly promotes face-to-face interactions, which are just fundamental for early bonding and development.
Eye contact.
Yes. The review cited the Leong et al. Study, which found that dry gaze during these kinds of interactions is associated with neural coupling between adults and infants.
Neural coupling, what's that?
Their brains are literally lighting up and synchronizing in similar patterns. It creates a powerful platform for engagement, communication, and learning.
Wow. Brains in sync through eye contact during singing.
Yeah, and unlike typical turn-taking in speech, singing often results in more simultaneous exchanges.
What do you mean, like talking over each other?
Not quite like that. More like overlapping vocalizations or movements happening at the same time, compared to speech scenarios, which are more like parent talks, baby babbles, parent talks.
Oh, okay. More togetherness.
Exactly. Infants, even as young as 3 months, participate actively, often with rhythmic movements on the beat while the parent is singing. This came up in studies like Carvalho et al., Jover et al., and Lungi. These shared, synchronous, active moments of interaction are argued to be incredibly important for strengthening the parent-infant bond.
And underlying all of this, presumably, is a sense of pleasure. It feels good.
Yes, that was consistently reported in the review. IDSG was highlighted as a source of significant pleasure and satisfaction, a cherished bonding moment. Parents found deep pleasure in simply spending time connecting with their infant through singing. That came through in studies like Baker and McInlay, Creighton et al., Fancourt and Perkins, and Pixley.
It all seems to feed into this beautiful self-reinforcing loop that the review's conclusion describes.
Hi.
The parent sings, which attracts the infant's attention. The infant enters a calm, attentive state which feels rewarding to the parent and supports their mental well-being. This encourages more of these shared exchanges, which strengthens the parent-infant dyad, and this stronger dyad sets the stage for a whole cascade of positive developmental effects in the child.
It's this continuous flow of positive feedback and mutual benefit.
Yeah.
Really quite powerful when you lay it all out.
Despite these really compelling and often consistent findings across multiple studies, the sources also quite rightly highlight important nuances, limitations in the existing research, and crucial areas for future exploration. We shouldn't just take it all at face value without critique.
No, definitely not. And this raises an important question for anyone looking at this body of work. What do we still need to learn to really get the full picture? What are the gaps?
Well, as we discussed, that inconsistency of findings for preterm infants regarding emotional regulation outcomes in the systematic review, that's a significant area needing more clarity.
Absolutely. We need further research to understand which specific populations of medically fragile infants benefit, under what conditions, and importantly, what might be contraindicated or need extra support, like with the severe brain injury example. Caution is still needed there.
And the systematic review was very thorough in detailing the limitations that the studies included, wasn't it? Like the definition of singing.
Yeah, there's a lack of an explicit, standardized definition of singing used across the studies. This means different researchers might be measuring slightly different phenomena. Is humming singing? Is chanting singing? Under the same label.
Which makes it harder to compare results directly.
Right. That lack of methodological consistency is always a challenge for synthesizing research. Another significant limitation noted was the exclusion of a notable proportion of potential participants.
The fussy babies.
Yeah, often ranging from 15% to 30% because the infants were too fussy or distressed during the attempted intervention. This exclusion could potentially introduce bias. Well, infants who are more easily distressed might have other underlying characteristics that could influence the results, and by excluding them, we might be missing part of the picture, perhaps overestimating the positive effects for the general population.
Good point. And the research tends to have certain demographic limitations too, you said?
Yes, predominantly quantitative methodologies dominated the field in this review, 18 out of 21 studies. And the sample sizes were often relatively small, with a median size of just 31 participants.
Not huge numbers.
No. Studies often relied on convenient samples that weren't always demographically representative, often lacking detailed data on ethnicity or socioeconomic status, making it difficult to generalize findings broadly.
And the focus on mothers.
A significant limitation highlighted, yes. Studies overwhelmingly focused on mothers, with only one in the review including fathers. This severely limits our understanding of the impact of singing by other important caregivers, dads, grandparents, siblings.
Right. And the age range seems limited too, mostly focusing on the first year.
Precisely. Most studies focused on infants 12 months and younger. While this suggests the impact might be most pronounced in that first year, it means we have less insight into how singing and musical interaction influence development throughout later infancy and toddlerhood.
And what about kids with different developmental paths?
Also limited. There was very little focus on infants with developmental disabilities, with only one study mentioned on infants with Down syndrome, leaving a big gap for understanding therapeutic potential for other vulnerable populations.
Our first source, the PubMed study on preterm infants, also mentioned its own specific limitations, right?
It did. Things like a reduced sample size after some necessary exclusions, potential issues with physiological signal quality collected from different centers involved in the study, and the fact that they didn't have data on the mother's stress level at the precise moment of the intervention, which could potentially influence the interaction and the baby's response.
Okay, so these identified limitations really paved the way for crucial future research directions. Where do we need to go next?
Well, both sources agreed on the need to collect more detailed contextual data on families, including things like parental stress levels, broader demographic information, and to be mindful of potential recruitment biases when designing studies.
They also want to explore the impact of specific song choice more, right?
Yes. Does it matter if the parent sings a song they chose themselves versus a pre-selected one? Do different types of songs, lullabies versus play songs, familiar versus unfamiliar, have different specific effects on physiology or behavior? More nuance there.
And a critical call from both sources is for more longitudinal studies, looking long-term.
Definitely. Most research so far shows immediate or short-term effects, maybe over a few weeks. We desperately need studies that follow children and families over extended periods, months, years, to see the long-term associations between early IDSG and later child development outcomes.
Like language, social skills.
Exactly. Also, the strength and nature of the parent-infant bond over time and the sustained impact on parental well-being across the life course. The PubMed study specifically suggested correlating their physiological findings with long-term linguistic assessment outcomes down the road.
And expanding the scope to include other vulnerable populations.
Yes, beyond typically developing infants or just those with Down syndrome. Exploring if IDSG holds therapeutic properties for infants with various other developmental or physical disabilities.
And involving more caregivers than just mothers.
Absolutely critical. Investigating the benefits of musical interactions with other caregivers, fathers, grandparents, siblings, professional caregivers like teachers in early learning settings or music therapists in hospitals is crucial to get a more complete picture.
And maybe looking at gender differences and how parents sing.
Yeah, examining potential gender differences in caregiver communication styles and singing is another really underexplored area.
And finally, just better, bigger studies overall.
Essentially, yes. There's a clear need for more studies with consistent methodologies, larger and more representative sample sizes, and careful stratification of participants into specific age windows to really understand how the impact of singing might change as infants progress through different developmental stages.
So what does this all add up to? After digging through all this research, what are the key takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that based on these sources, the power of singing to infants is far more than just, anecdotal comfort or tradition. It's backed by growing scientific evidence.
Right. It impacts babies physiologically.
Potentially influencing autonomic nervous system maturation, as strongly suggested by that preterm study.
It profoundly supports their emotional regulation.
Helping to influence arousal, affect, distress, maybe even sleep patterns, particularly for typically developing infants, though it's more complex for some preterms.
It contributes meaningfully to their cognitive and motor development.
Helping wire their brains for language and patterns while building physical skills through movement and rhythm.
And importantly, it's a two-way street.
Absolutely. It strongly supports parent well-being, validating their role as caregivers, boosting confidence, reducing stress, maybe even mitigating P&D symptoms.
And critically, it strengthens that crucial early bond.
By promoting emotional attunement, responsiveness, those shared reciprocal moments, and just mutual pleasure. The research really highlights a clear, positive feedback loop.
Where benefits for the baby loop back to support the parent.
Strengthening the entire dyad and setting the stage for positive development down the line.
However, the research, as we've discussed, is still relatively young and clearly incomplete in places, especially when looking at medically fragile infants or long-term outcomes.
Exactly. We've just begun to map the scientific landscape of this ancient universal practice. It really makes you wonder, what possibilities lie ahead as researchers continue to explore the full, nuanced effects of this seemingly simple act of a caregiver singing to their child?
It's a practice that connects us on biological, emotional, developmental, and cultural levels.
With benefits that seem to ripple outwards in ways we're only beginning to fully understand.
Well, that wraps up this deep dive into the power of lullabies and infant-directed singing, guided by the insights from these fascinating research papers and articles.
We've aimed to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, hopefully providing you with a shortcut to being well-informed on why this intuitive practice is so incredibly impactful for both babies and parents.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of the sources.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
Thanks for listening. For all things health and fitness, subscribe to our newsletter today. Find out more at armygymnastics.com.